Jim, everyone. How are we doing today? Oops.
G to the M, G to the M. Can you hear me loud and clear, Humpty?
I think so. Can you try that again?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yep, I can hear you fine.
We're doing this thing again where I'm logging in from one device and speaking from another, hosting from one device, I should say, and speaking from another, and it causes some issues. I can still hear myself. Oh, it's not far enough. How are you doing, Polaris?
All good, family. Just finished my Jamaican jerk chicken and rice and peas. So I'm all ready for the talks, bro. How are you?
Thanks for sharing your meal. I actually haven't had lunch yet, so I'm hungry. So thanks for that.
Bro, I was training my students from 12 in the afternoon. I only had yogurt with walnuts and berries and stuff. And I was dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, after like 9 hours of exercise and training, I was just dying. So I thought I'd quickly fuel myself up before the call starts. And today was Jamaican Day, you know?
What does that mean? Is Jamaican Day like a holiday or?
Jamaican food
I don't
day,
know.
bro.
Okay, like that's the name of the holiday?
No, it's my own personally self-certified. Like, you know, I fancied Jamaican food today. So I said I said let it be Jamaican Day today for me. And we had we ordered some Jamaican food, rice and peas, jerk chicken, some mutton soup. Yeah, so it was all good. I love Jamaican food. I love all different types of food, to be quite honest. You know, I love like tasting different cuisines. But this is not the reason why we are here.
I mean, it could be. I'm gonna change the name of the title to Jamaican. I am changing the name of the title.
What?
Crypto economic tools is what we should want to talk about to start. So, keep hitting the O instead of the E. Okay. So.
Right, Humpty, you're breaking up, brother, and I think you're a bit far away from the mic, so I can't hear you properly.
Hang on. Can you hear me? Can you hear me still?
Yeah, that's it. Perfect.
Okay, well then that means that my microphone's not getting picked up. So give me a moment. Okay, well I'm going to assume that you can hear me. So I've changed the name of the space for now, exploring crypto economic tools, because I wanted to take a moment and talk about some of the ways that people can engage with crypto today, and through different incentive mechanisms, I suppose, either to earn crypto, to gift crypto. I really just want to take a look at that, and maybe use that as a catalyst to exploring some of the crypto economic tools that are available through the Ontology ecosystem. So I think the first and foremost, and this is not, I think, any surprise to anybody who's familiar with Ontology, but staking is a mechanism for providing an incentive for people to do kind of a certain action, a positive action on the network. For instance, in this case, you delegate or stake your tokens, and what you're doing is the incentive is you will get rewarded for protecting the network. right? So by basically participating in the consensus of the network. Maybe we can just explore that for a moment and then introduce some other types of crypto economic incentives. I can also talk a little bit about retroactive public goods funding, which is something that I am familiar with because of just either contributing to communities who have retroactive public goods funding initiatives as a community incentive tool, but also as a way to incentivize people to build certain types of products on a given ecosystem, as the name says, public goods. So let's talk about staking. Polaris, what's your familiarity with staking, man?
Um, safe staking is for me like in layman's terms, it's like a savings account, really, isn't it? But it's um, it's like in normal conventional economics. You go to the bank, um, you you purchase or you deposit a certain amount of money, and with that amount of money, you lock in a certain yield depending on um, what what level of savings account it is, and then you start collecting yield. So in DeFi, um, I think a savings account, it's like staking is like, but obviously, like, it gets a bit more complicated than just a savings account. But it's like that. Kind of like, for me anyway, it kind of like feels like it functions like a savings account. You stake your initial amount, and once you have staked, you are acknowledging that you are part of that network, and you are either validating those transactions using some sort of a software and hardware equipment, or you are soft staking and just having your own, um, just having like some sort of a um, your personal existence on the blockchain, which is used to validate a certain transaction, um, and as a result, you end up getting yield or rewards from the gas fees from the networks, because you tried like stabilizing so there's like different aspects of staking. It goes bigger, and of course, but that's my like 2 cents of staking. Like, this is what I think what staking is, unless, like, if I miss something, Humpty. And that's
Yeah, no, man. I think, yeah, go for it. I think, yeah, that's a good way to put it. I mean, the word yield is probably the best way to explain the mechanism that may be most familiar to people in terms of, taking a certain amount of funds. And your example was actually really good. I appreciate that. Going to the bank, putting it in a bank account, and through the interest rates, which fluctuate, you can earn a certain yield in return. I don't know, here in the US, which is where I'm, dialing in from, uh, interest, or should I say, yeah, savings accounts or yield bearing accounts have always been a very kind of, it's not always the most exciting way of kind of earning, money from your money, if you will, because interest rates are usually so low. Where if you put your money in a savings account, historically, as far as I can remember, it's usually sub 1% that you'll get in return for leaving your money in a bank. Now, sure, there are different types of yield bearing accounts, and they all have different kind of levels of return. But the one that I think most people are familiar with, and I think part of that is because of the liquidity of their funds, meaning you can go to the bank and just pull it out tomorrow. You can put it in today, pull it out tomorrow. You don't have to worry about the funds that are going to get locked into a contract, right? They have other things called CD accounts, which they have different kind of lock-in periods, days, months. And during that time, you have no liquidity, right? You can't go to the bank and say, hey, never mind, I changed my mind. I want to take my money out. So it's locked, it's vested for a certain amount of time. Now, because of that, you're basically letting the bank use that money and you'll get some return. It increases the risk, I suppose, when you think about it like that at a bank, because you don't have access to that money. So the risk that you will not have money to buy food, hopefully you're not putting money in like that if you need to buy food. But what I'm saying is the risk goes up, therefore the reward goes up. I think that when you think about staking contracts, in this case, let's just use a very kind of an example here that we can point to very easily and say, you take your ONT tokens and you stake them, whether that be you run a node yourself or you delegate them to some other node operator. It is bound to that contract for the for that period of time to get a reward. Usually it depends, it fluctuates a little bit at Ontology, but it really is bound by the number of blocks that are issued or created on the network. But let's just assume that it takes 2 weeks, right, for that period to close. During that time, your funds are kind of making money, if you will, right? There's an incentive attached for having done that. Firstly, the incentive, as I started, I like to think of it as you are doing your part in governance, right? So saying, I want to delegate this so that these node operators can do the work that's necessary for the blockchain. I do my part in delegating to people or projects that I believe are doing good work on the blockchain, right? Or just generally, maybe across several blockchains. I speak from experience because I used to operate a cross-chain node or a multi-chain node where we did development work across like 8 or 9 blockchains. So these are the intangible, I guess, incentives. The tangible ones, obviously, is at the end of that, consensus round, you're going to get the ability to unstake those tokens, right? So saying, okay, I want that liquidity back. And then get the yield from it, right? So to the point that Polaris was talking about earlier. So I think that's the parallel there. Obviously, there's a lot more intricacies involved, complexities, because again, you are your own bank. So, you can go to the bank and you lose your password or whatever, they'll fix it for you. If you do that on chain, it's not so simple. So just to kind of introduce, I guess, staking for anybody in the audience who doesn't know what we're talking about, has some familiarity. That's one thing. Now, let's dive into it a little bit more, because I think that this is something that's very interesting. Things that I've seen across different blockchains as we're talking about staking now. There's 2 ways about going about providing liquidity for people and still being able to participate in the staking ecosystem. And I guess one of those would be liquid staking, and the other would be derivatives from your staking tokens, which then would be pegged to those staked tokens. And then you can use as liquidity elsewhere, right? Maybe there's a DeFi protocol you want to be lending them at to earn yield that way. Maybe there's a way to actually buy things with those derivative tokens. And then once you unstake, right, or get that money back from the contract where you were earning yield, those tokens get burned. So you can't have 2 of the same tokens. So yeah, What's your familiarity with both, Polaris, with liquid staking and staking derivatives? Because I'd love to talk about that a little bit too.
That's very interesting because I was doing some research last week, I think, because a friend of mine has uh, initiated. He's working with another group. Let me see if I can pull it up. And what they have done is basically they've started fractionalizing NFTs, and then, but they're not just fractionalizing NFTs. They're creating like a they create like 100,000 uh, um, divisions of it, or factions of it, or fractions of it, and once one one unit of that is like, so basically in order to redeem the full NFT, you need to have all the all the fractions in one unit. Otherwise you cannot redeem the NFT. So the NFT gets locked, the liquidity gets locked, and you can use that liquidity in subdivisions, which is like a 100,000 unit, and then from there you can start your own economy. And my friend basically, what he did was he fractionalized a bored ape, and then he sold one unit of it, and then held 99 of it. So like now he won't be able to like redeem that bored ape, but at the same time he's like, he's locked that liquidity, because once you create semi subdivisions of an asset, then you can, you know you've got more tangibility, I would say, to be able to maximize whatever you're trying to do with that locked liquid, if that makes any sense. So yeah, that's what I've been familiar with, and it's pretty interesting because the fractional aspect was has been there for a while now, but like to be able to use those sub tokens with those fractions and be able to, yeah, start your own economy from it, was something which I found very interesting.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, fractionalization or fractionalized assets, I think that's different from liquid staking, but certainly I agree there are some parallels, some similarities in terms of the ability to use those as a crypto economic tool to build a community, I think, right? And the other one to share governance over that community. So in your example, assuming your friend fractionalized that valuable asset into 100 pieces, right? And again, it's not like you're actually ripping a picture apart into 100 pieces, but you're creating a token that represents or 100 tokens that represent a fraction of that asset. It's completely separate, completely different. You would normally have to use a platform that allows for that type of transaction. That token, the host token, the main asset gets locked and vested into a contract until those 100 tokens get redeemed altogether. I think it's really interesting. It also provides a level of what would the right word be here? A level of, I guess, delegated control over ownership of an asset. So in an example, I have a family of 3. If I wanted everyone to have access to the things that I own, I can fractionalize an asset like that, and everyone has a third, for instance. And it's only upon their agreement that they can basically put it back together and sell it whenever everyone agrees. So it's a really interesting way of creating also like governance mechanisms using crypto tools. Liquid staking is more so to do with, yeah, again, I'm just going to use an example here. as Ethereum, you stake your 1 Ether on Ethereum. Say you use Lido to do that. Uh, you are then returned with an ST representing staked ETH token, so STETH token. That token itself has liquidity, right? It has some value because it should be worth 1 ETH because the asset that backs it is 1 ETH. So usually these derivatives are 1-to-1 for whatever value it is that you're putting into the contract. So the benefit to that is, again, imagining that there's a market for all these things. You allow people to participate in an action that's valuable to you. I'm a blockchain. I want people to stake their tokens for a variety of reasons. You've gotten me to do that. Bravo, good for you. I've now been able to also reward you in addition to the yield that you're going to earn on those tokens that are locked into that contract, a derivative token that you can use in other marketplaces, potentially even restaking it, which is really interesting. If you open a staking contract where you can stake STETH token, the STETH token, and then get a derivative token of that, that would be really interesting to see how far down that rabbit hole you could go. Again, it's a matter of someone setting that up, and now you have an STST ETH token. So to me, it's really interesting, right? Because again, it's about giving people that freedom and flexibility with their assets, because life happens and you never know when you'll need what you own. But also, I think it's part of the this self-sovereign, non-custodial kind of relationship that we have in crypto, at least for those of us who are kind of not holding our assets in an exchange, but instead we hold them ourselves through our own non-custodial wallets. What are your thoughts about that, Polaris, in terms of like, if you are staking, let's just say if you're staking on Ontology, what are your thoughts about those ONT tokens while they're staked and you cannot do anything with, but having the ability to own a derivative token, for instance, that then you can, kind of do what you wish with it, or just hold?
So, I mean, liquid staking, now that you've clarified, it's like that's a very good way, because I think before there was a misconception that you need 32 ETH to be able to validate and run your own um, like validating node for Ethereum. But because of liquid staking, you can like use service providers and you can just get your own share, and then it returns you uh, a token which is pretty much identical to the value of the original token, but it's also representing the protocol or the staking protocol which you've initiated to redeem that. So the same way, if like ontology tokens, the same way, if we was to like um, get an equivalent version of staked on ONT tokens, that could quite possibly be very interesting, because then again, you wouldn't be able to redeem it fully because your stake is locked in the smart contract, but you should be able to prove your provenance in terms of someone who has a stake in running a net, running or validating a network. Now, what really intrigues me is that, like, what possibilities could you actually use? Would those, like, for example, if I was to sell those token onwards, and the person holding them, would the amount of tokens, will that hold the same value as of the original ONT tokens held? And we've got an interesting case study. I'm not sure if you remember, like the about a couple of years ago, when we did this philosopher NFT uh, staking thing, where people were buying the philosopher NFT, and each NFT basically was equivalent to 100 ONT or 10 ONT, I'm not sure. And then if you had like 10 of those NFTs, you automatically you had to like go on to a smart contract, and it automatically staked your ONT for you. But it never said that it was actually staking ONT. It was actually saying that you were staking the NFTs, and then the equivalent ONT reward, wa- uh, was being sent out to the respective NFT holders. So yeah, it's like something which needs to be explored, certainly. uh, and considering that something on the same kind of like wavelengths, but uh, very earlier on, when this concept, we was just still exploring this concept, the philosopher NFT is a good example.
Yeah. So just to rewind a little bit to, I think, the point you made. Yeah. I think on Ethereum, just to finish that example, you still need 32 ETH to self stake or to run a node. But yeah, it's the pooled staking service providers, if you will, where you can stake anything below 32 ETH. If you don't want to stake all 32 ETH, if you don't have all 32 ETH, and then you get a derivative token from that. So yeah, on the network itself, there's still a minimum kind of 32 ETH requirement, but beyond that, you can kind of easily find these service providers who are providing yield in return, shared yield, right? Kind of like what you do on Ontology. There's node providers that share their yield with those who delegate to them, stake with them. So, yeah, in terms of your last question right now, or the point you were making, I think, yeah, I do recall the Philosopher NFT. And if I remember correctly, because this was over a year ago, I believe, the
Two
Philosopher,
years 2 years.
2 years. Yeah, it's a long time. It's a while ago. The Philosopher NFT, for those in the audience who weren't around 2 years ago and are interested in understand what that was, Ontology was trying to figure out a way to make staking more accessible, more fun. And so instead of someone having to take their 100 ONT, I believe it was, and staking that to a node, you would basically use that 100 ONT to acquire this NFT. And that NFT in itself, by itself, by owning that, provided you the same yield, equivalent yield for that 100 NFT as if you had actually gone and staked that onto the staking platform, which on Ontology, that's node, Node dot ONT.io, which I actually thought was really cool because, first of all, I think at the time NFTs were just they were all the rage, right? Like there was always kind of this new NFT that was popping that was driving a lot of attention, but a lot of it was driven by speculation, right? I mean, I think a lot of that the NFT market at that time was hugely speculative. Um, Whereas, like, I think there was always this question, like, what's the utility to my token? Like, beyond just having a Bored Ape, what does it represent? Well, sure, there was the speculative value that's part of what it represented. Ontology, though, said, what if we were to take this concept, which is important to us, to have people delegate their tokens, their ONT, to participate in governance on the network, but change out the mechanics a little bit, where instead of having to go and delegate them to a smart contract, staking contract, they are just basically doing that with an NFT contract. I thought that was really cool, and certainly is kind of the same thing, right? The incentives, the crypto economic incentive was hold this NFT, earn yield, the ONT is still kind of participating in the same way, or at least contributing in a similar way, but not directly in the same way as it is through the staking contract. So, anywho, that's just one way. And I don't want to go too deep into this, or at least try to make this any bigger a conversation if there isn't a conversation to have there. But anything else I missed, Polaris, about staking that you would definitely say is a very valuable tool for blockchains, for creating crypto economic incentives as well, maybe even using derivative tokens as an example?
No, I think you pretty much covered it all. And like the only thing which I would add on top is that, like, we gave of course, this is like not financial advice and everyone needs to do their own research. But we mentioned, like, earlier on about a savings account and the yield coming from a savings account. So with great powers come great responsibility, I suppose. And like, one needs to be aware of all the variables and all the nuances which can potentially impact what you're staking. So concepts like principal investment or the principal amount which you invested, yield balancing, all of these things are very important, because the bank, when you go to the bank, they do all of that stuff for you, and they're like working on a currency which is regulated by that very geopolitical location. But when you're talking DeFi, or when you're talking like cryptocurrencies, and when you're talking about staking mechanisms which are integrated within a specific crypto, then it's very important to like make sure that all variables are thoroughly researched, and like a good awareness and a good like investment thesis is created before jumping into any sort of like movement. So that's just like something which I would like advise to anyone listening. It's very important to be like aware of your how you approach issues. And certainly us being there, um, and being in the industry for a while, these little pearls of wisdom they make a big difference.
Yeah, thank you. So one other thing that I wanted to introduce into this conversation of crypto economic tools and crypto economic incentives is retroactive public goods funding. Have you heard of the word before, Polaris? Retroactive public goods funding, or RPGF as it's
No, I
sometimes
haven't.
shortened.
I haven't.
Okay. Have you heard of Optimism, the layer 2
Yes, I have
rollup?
heard about.
Okay.
Yes.
What have you heard about Optimism, at least from its early days in when it first rolled out?
There was an Optimism airdrop, I remember, and everyone was going crazy about it, and I wasn't very I wasn't a big fan of it, because I've had my airdrops in 2019, 17, all of that, and I've had enough of it. So yeah, I mean, I didn't really dive too deep into Optimism airdrop or the layer 2 chain itself, because I mean, you know um, maybe let's put it this way: I wasn't very too optimistic about Optimism, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes sense, man. And it's funny to hear you say I was tired of airdrops, because I think you might be the only person in the world that ever said that. Well, let me just
Bro, most of them are
briefly.
like dead airdrops, like you get like
Sure.
5 billion stuff and then it's worthless. So what's the
Yeah.
point? A point came that I was like, nah, this is not for me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if it would surprise you if I told you that those airdrops are valued, I think, a couple of $1,000s, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but that the value of the airdrop is less so the point I'm trying to make here. The point I want to make is in terms of optimism. I think optimism in itself as a project, as a product, has been hugely influential to the development of scalable solutions for blockchains. I think before optimism, we kept having the same argument about scalability of blockchains by creating more layer one blockchains, right? Or improving the efficiency of blockchains, probably better said. So different blockchains would come up, and their thesis was we're better than Ethereum because we're more efficient, we're faster, we're cheaper. Usually, were the two main arguments for a lot of new blockchains. The problem was, I think that there was a huge kind of consensus around Ethereum as the blockchain for developers to build on, right? I think that there's this kind of there's this race to learning Solidity, to building with Solidity, and because of that, I think Ethereum did a fantastic job of capturing a lot of the developers who were building on chain. And I mean, I'm not stretching the truth here. You can look at the amount of innovation that happened on Ethereum over the course of its life to just really prove that there's been a lot of value there driven by its developers. So the challenge always was, how can we help to scale Ethereum? And I think a lot of different, even layer one blockchains said, well, there was a cross-chain thesis then, right? Where we can support development through our blockchain and across to Ethereum. But I think when Optimism first came out, it really showed how that could provably work because of the way that optimistic rollups work. And I'm not going to get into that in this call. But if you want to learn more about that, anybody in the audience, feel free to DM me. In fact, I wrote through my project Crypto Sapiens 2 articles that talk about layer 2 rollups and optimistic rollups specifically. So there was this idea of like scaling Ethereum and Optimism when it first came out, wanted to capture the attention of as many people as possible. And what they did is they created this airdrop, which rewarded people retroactively for having contributed to public goods platforms. So this is really where the word retroactive public goods funding comes from, right? Maybe not precisely, but definitely that encompasses everything, right? There's a retroactive airdrop or reward that then funds or incentivizes people for having contributed to public goods. In my case, I think I got an airdrop because I had an ENS associated to an account that I had used for contributing to Gitcoin, which is another public goods platform, and to grants. So basically, projects go there and say, "Hey, I'm building this. Would be nice if you contributed some coins your way," right? So Gitcoin, and then you reward them. You basically put money up, $1, $2, $10, $100 to people and projects on that platform. So Optimism said, hey, anyone who's ever participated and they had a checklist of like 10 things, you can claim this airdrop. And because of that, I and thousands of people were able to claim that airdrop. They now, as of last week on Friday, closed submissions for what they're calling retroactive public goods funding number 3, so RPGF 3. I bring all of this up. That was a very long way of getting to the point, which my wife will agree. I tend to go the very longest way to get to the point. RPGF 3 is a mechanism or RPGF and RPGF3 are mechanisms for retroactively rewarding people for doing positive work. So it's another crypto economic tool at our disposal for rewarding people for the work that they do. I'll leave it there. Polaris, what do you think about that? Because I could talk about one more thing that I recently participated in that is also alongside, that speaks to RPGF.
I'm really interested, Humpty, and this is something very. It's definitely tickled my neurons. So retroactively, um, rewarding members of the public who are good actors. So, um, so like for example, is that an example when, um, let's say, if MetaMask says that, like, any person who's used OpenSea and MetaMask, and used like some sort of like conversion, uh, they'll reward they'll reward
Mm-hmm.
some sort of like tokens to all those users. Does that fall under the retro active category as well? Because users have utilized the platform, and with that they've got some sort of on-chain residue left, or like some on-chain activity which proves their usage of the platform. And then as a result, if someone wanted to reward those users for using that platform, would that also fall under the same category, or is that slightly
Yeah.
different?
Yeah. So it really depends how broad or fine you want to define your rewards criteria. So to say someone has used MetaMask, you have a very broad group of people you're going to be rewarding then, right? Um, you can get a little bit more specific and say anybody who has transacted on chain in the last 30 days using, and I don't actually know how you would actually see if that transaction came from MetaMask, but someone smarter than me could probably figure that out. But if you say anybody who's transacted on
Props.
chain the last 30 days, 90 days, 120 days can earn this airdrop. And based on the recency of their transaction, the airdrop would be higher, right? Because you could score someone who recently transacted, let's call it a 10, someone who did it in the last 90 days, a 5, and someone who did it in the last 180 days, a 1. And so based on that score, someone would be able to get more rewards.
So we've got like Nouns DAO, for example, and we've got like AIP 39 ape coins. Like, they incentivize like uh, members of the community to like. So what about them? Or is it like it's just
Yeah.
like the whole umbrella, isn't it? It covers the whole thing. That's
Yeah.
very
So your
because
example of nouns, you can say if someone holds a noun that they are a more valuable actor. Like I'm not saying that, but like you're defining that, right? Assuming that you have a project, Polaris, and you want to incentivize a group of people, like basically you're segmenting the community, or these on-chain actors, if you will, more broadly than a community, based on certain activities that they've had, on chain. You can say if you hold a noun, that's the kind of person I want to reward. You can even say if someone who holds a noun has voted on their governance platform, you can really fine tune the criteria, so that it isn't so broad, right? Because maybe you don't want just anybody who holds a noun. Anybody can buy a noun. But if they really care about the community, they're actually using that noun to vote, right? And so anybody who's voted on a proposal in the last 30 days that has a noun should get that airdrop. So we're talking very specifically right now about the reward criteria, but I really wanted to introduce and discuss the funding mechanism, which allows you to get really nuanced in this. I personally think it's really cool, but I'm gonna shut up right now and let you respond to that, because I do want to also introduce something I recently did with Gitcoin, which is another public goods platform that uses RPGF, and some of the conversations that spawned from some of our recent actions.
Yeah, you've been spot on, because that's the segmentation aspect was what I was going to hit at next, and you already like mentioned that, because this becomes a very very powerful tool in terms of someone who's trying to provide, like, let's say, I start doing my travel blog, and somehow I find the right criteria to create a segment in Web3 for people who are travel enthusiasts, by figuring out certain by creating a funnel for segmentation. And then by once I've done that, all I need to do is, create some sort of an incentive protocol which attracts all of them towards that Web3 blog, which would target, which would like work on providing like value to them, and I would get the right audience, so I'm not like larping to, I don't feel like I'm larping to the wrong audience. That's a very powerful tool, and that's just me randomly just um, hypothesizing about it. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, and let's go about the Gitcoin.
Yeah. So last week also was the last opportunity for anybody who has done anything to contribute they were more specific, right? So this is a good example of how specific you can be. You can look just at your community. So their criteria was anybody who has contributed to the Gitcoin ecosystem can apply, firstly, to to open up a grant where people can then fund their grants, right? And so through my podcast, um, I'm constantly having conversations with so many people who are building in Web3. Shameless Shill, Crypto Sapiens, if you're interested, go check it out. It's on all major podcast platforms. Anyways, we had some of the people from Gitcoin up there. And when we brought them up there, we got to learn about a lot of things that they're building: quadratic funding, Sybil resistance, these different incentive mechanisms that we're talking about, Gitcoin grants, some of these identity solutions like Gitcoin Passport, which, by the way, many of the times when I was talking to these folks on the podcast about their products, about this platform, we were talking about ontology too, right? Because you think about it, Sybil resistance is a way to remove either bots or fake actors from a system who are trying to take advantage of the financial upside by either creating multiple accounts or just spamming the network, if you will, to be able to get more rewards. Sybil resistance, Gitcoin Passport, all these things have to do with identity and reputation. And so we were also talking about OntID and Orange Protocol. And so if you're interested in learning what any of those things means, ONT.io is your best bet, and orangeprotocol.io to learn about the different ways that you can build identity and reputation to increase your credibility, on chain. So anyways, through these different activities, I was able to qualify to open up a grant on their platform. And people were contributing to my grant. And I'm not saying like a lot of money. People weren't coming in with like thousands of dollars and saying, Humpty, you're amazing. Here's $1,000. Humpty, you're amazing. No, like I was getting on average like $2 per grant. But here's the really cool part about retroactive public goods funding. Because, by the way, this is how I was going to be retroactively rewarded by the community for the work that I did. So over the course of a quarter, I wrote certain articles. The community, which I think that's probably even more powerful than the ecosystem or platform, rewarded me for that work, saying, hey, here's $2. I appreciate you showing up. I appreciate you doing what you were doing anyways because you enjoy to do it. But the really cool part is then the platform Gitcoin says, well, here's $22,000 that we're going to put on this for this grant round, and we're going to disperse this money based on the quadratically. Okay, so I'll explain that in a bit. We'll disperse these funds quadratically based on the number of funds or grants that people receive, and so that those $2 I was getting, the number of the amount of the grant that I got didn't really matter, as the number of people that were contributing to my grant. So because I got like, I believe 70 or 80 people that contributed, my quadratic formula for what I would get in return would total in terms of the grant round was not limited by what people gave me, which I think ended up being like $250. Now the team is doing the calculations on the back end to make sure that there was no bots that were spamming, the network and the platform. I will get a return from that grant equal to the number of contributors compared to other people that got in terms of number of contributors to their grant. So it's very difficult to show or tell you exactly what number that would be right now or how that works. So I think it is called
Humpty, you've got rugged, bro.
okay, I'm going to speak from this account because I think I booted myself. Can you hear me, players?
Yeah, I had to just switch on to Wi-Fi, 4G myself, just to make sure that it wasn't me who was rugging.
No, I was trying to pull up something from my computer where I was logged in from, and I didn't realize that I did that from the tab where I was connected to the Twitter space. So I basically rugged myself. I should have been paying more attention. But anyways, there's a formula that you can find, and I believe it is WTF is QF.com, which basically translates to WTF is quadratic formula .com. Anyways, that's just to show ways that all of that. By the way, I apologize for the very very long way of responding or talking about this, but all of this to say that there's ways to create those retroactive rewards for people, not just where a platform can reward you the way that Optimism did it, but you open up this system where the community, your peers themselves can reward you and say, hey, I want to recognize you for the work that you've done. I think that's a much more powerful mechanism for creating incentives, because I recognize the appreciation for my peers, and it just, to me, it resonates a lot more. And then having the platform or the organization, in this case you can say Ontology, Optimism, say we're going to then add more funds that are going to be dispersed based on the number of people that supported that individual. So what are your thoughts about that? I know we're reaching the top of the hour, and I spent about 2 whole minutes trying to find a way to get back on here.
Yeah, I think today's conversation has been really productive. Like, it's certainly opened up quite a lot of different pathways for me, certainly. And I would definitely be exploring these venues a bit more, trying to understand them. And my thoughts on what you just said is that like this is something which I hold very dear to, like for example, like I've made a huge impact on a lot of communities in Web3, and some of those communities, or the way the whole incentivization model is, I haven't really been like, acknowledged in a way. Well, I haven't been acknowledged retrospectively. Let's, you know so to be able to have that aspect where you're like literally getting acknowledged as a mechanism, as a system where users, uh, are incentivized to act as good actors. And of course it's good for good actors anyway, because they would be doing what they're doing anyway. And so it's like, it sounds great. And I'm glad that we had this conversation today, and I hope all our listeners found this uh, equally as illuminating as I did.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm glad we got to talk about this. As I mentioned, this is for me. This was a good conversation that I've been wanting to have for some time. We spoke. I spoke to the ontology team earlier in the week, and I said, "What are some of our objectives? Or some of the conversations that would be really important for us to kind of promote a little bit more?" And I think ontology, and again, this is no surprise to anybody who's been following ontology for some time. Staking is a big part of the way that people recognize who they are. That's a lot of people's first touch point into the ontology community. And so we talked about staking being a good topic, and so I wanted to introduce it, but I don't like to limit myself in this space to just one topic. As you know, anybody who's been following this space for some time knows that we normally run a path of discovery before getting to one topic. But it is nice to sometimes have one topic that drives the conversation, but still keeping it open to other kind of mechanisms to then provide people with some context and range of knowledge. So crypto economic incentive, crypto economic tools just totally make sense to me. So yeah, Polaris, thank you so much for being up here with me today as usual, and I appreciate your time and your insights, and hopefully I'll see you again next week.
100%. Thank you so much for having me, and take care, everyone. Look after your health, drink lots of water. See you next week. Goodbye.
All right. Yeah, bye bye.